I'm Jennifer Forbes here at the Hampton Park Library with another episode of Roots and Readers. Today we're going to talk about winter gardening. You probably think to yourself, it's winter, nothing's growing, there's nothing to do. I thought there's actually plenty you can do over the winter to help get ready for your spring and summer and fall growing seasons. Make things a little easier and so you don't feel quite so rushed or harried trying to get the seeds in and move things around. First thing you can do is planning. You can go back and look at your journal that you kept, hopefully, last year about what you planted where, how it did, whether you moved one thing from one place to another because it didn't work well. How did it do this last year? Go back and look over everything and start making plans for what you want to do this coming year. You also want to see about preparing a gardening calendar. That's part of your planning. Take an extra calendar you might have, or the calendar you have on the wall at home, or pull out your phone or your iPad and start making notes as to when you need to have this garden bed turned over, when you need to start these seeds. Start planning out on a calendar what you need to do when, so you don't forget to do something and feel like you are constantly playing catch up. You can look ahead to your calendar and say, okay, I need to start my peas, I need to start my cantaloupe, my watermelon, whatever you would like to do. You can see when you need to start those so you can make sure you have everything prepared and you're ready for when you want to start those seeds, or when you want to go out, turn over this bed, make sure that this bed is ready. There's a lot of things you can do. Another thing you may want to do over the winter is review some seed catalogs. You can look up your favorite brands, which seeds did well for you last time, what did you like. Order some catalogs, browse around online, start planning out your garden. It's a good idea to buy your seeds early because as you get closer to planting and in the growing season, they may be out of stock of something that you wanted to plant or something you wanted to grow. Take a look outside, see if there's some gaps. Maybe you have several evergreens here, a deciduous plant that's dropped all of its leaves here, and more evergreens here, and there's just a big hole right there. You may want to actually move that deciduous somewhere else and put something else evergreen in there so it doesn't look unsightly or like a big gap. Or if you look outside and there's nothing that looks good out there, find something that blooms in the winter. There are some plants that do that. Find something that has textured or colored bark, something interesting to look at, and put it outside so that you'll have some interesting landscape out there even in the winter time. Another area you can look at in the wintertime is your tools. You want to take a look at your mower. Maybe you need to have it serviced. Maybe you need to have the blade sharpened. Now is a great time to do it when the grass is dormant and you're not pulling it out and using it all the time. If it has to go to the shop and sit for a few weeks or a month because there's a backup or a long line, you're not going to be behind on your mowing or your yard maintenance that way. So now is a good time to sharpen tools, sharpen your mower blades, get things serviced. Over the winter time, it's a good idea to clean your tools. If you're like me, your shovel is dirty, it is covered in, this is actually mulch it's covered in right now, but you might have mud, crusted dirt, or something on there. You might want to go ahead and clean it off, and then wipe a small thin layer of vegetable oil over it. That'll keep it from rusting if you end up having damp weather over the winter. It'll keep your tools from rusting over the winter as well. Won't hurt them at all. So you may want to go ahead and clean up your tools. That's a great thing to do over the winter. You can wash your gardening gloves, wash your gardening shoes, maybe get some of those layers of dirt off. I don't know if you're like me, sometimes I'll get a thorn or a splinter or something. It just kind of irritates me, but it's not actually poking me or hurting me, and I don't want to take the time to get in there and pull it out or anything. Wintertime, turn those gloves inside out, check them, make sure you don't have holes, make sure that you don't need a new pair. Check your gardening shoes, make sure you don't have holes in them where soggy ground is going to seep in. It's a good idea to go ahead and go over those items as well. The other thing you can do is organize your garden tools or your garden shed. Make sure you know where everything is. Maybe buy some pegs and a pegboard, organize it. Maybe you don't like where these shovels are because they keep falling over as you reach for the one in back. Maybe find another way to organize your tools. There are also plenty of things you can do in the winter in the soil. If you live in Georgia and you want to break a new bed in and you've got clay in your soil, like we do, this is a great time to get out there, turn it over. Don't do it when it's soggy or moist because that'll actually make it more compact. But wait until it's a good day out there, it's not frozen, not soggy, and turn over that soil in that new bed. The rest of the winter, with the moisture and the freezes and the frosts and everything we have, will actually get down into that clay and it'll actually break it up for you, so you won't have to break apart as many soil or clay clods come spring when it's time to plant. Another thing you can do while you're out there, if you're turning it over anyway, throw some soil conditioner in there. Put some compost in there. If you've got a compost bin, this is a great time to use some of that compost that you've been collecting. Throw that in the soil over the winter. That will go ahead and continue to break down and add a lot more nutrients to the soil, so your plants will love it come spring. You can also look for pests while you're doing that. If you're turning over the earth and you see grubs or you see any kind of ground-dwelling pests, now is a great time to pull them out and get rid of them so that they don't hatch in the spring, come out and lay eggs and decimate your vegetable crop. Another thing you want to do, if you have leaves still in your yard, grab your rake, rake them up into a pile. Do not bag them up. Put them in your garden beds. Those leaves will break down and turn into mulch. They will end up adding more nutrients to the soil. If you have a compost heap, put them in the compost bin. Add some to the compost bin. They will break down. Again, they'll turn into compost. They'll add more nutrients to your soil. You can get wood chips from tree services. There's a lot of great mulch out there. Grab the mulch and throw that on your garden beds. That'll insulate your plants from the temperatures that when they get really cold. That'll also lock in moisture as well. It'll help your plants and it'll break down again over the winter and it'll turn into nutrients. You want that mulch to break down because it does put more nutrients back into the soil and it does make your plants healthier. Just be careful if you're using wood chips or mulch from a tree service. Make sure you know where it comes from. Talk to them. Don't just grab free mulch from somewhere. If they've cut down and chipped up dead or diseased trees, you don't want to put that in your garden because you don't want to introduce new disease to your garden. You also want to cover any empty beds you might have, or again, if you want to start a new bed, this is a great time to cover them. Use black landscaping fabric, put it across the top, or black plastic bags. That'll keep the weeds from growing. Again, things do grow over the winter slowly, but they do grow. But if you will put some black landscape fabric or black plastic over your empty beds or over the new area that you want to start a garden bed in, weight it down on the edges. That will keep the weeds from growing through it. It'll also, as we get warmer days, The sun will heat up that black plastic, and it'll keep weed seeds from germinating and sprouting underneath. It gets pretty warm under there, and it'll keep those from sprouting. There's also plenty you can do outside in the garden with the plants in pots while you're outside during the winter. The garden pots that you have out there that might be empty, you want to go ahead and turn those over, empty them out. If water collects in them over the winter and freezes, it can crack or split those pots. So make sure that you're taking care of those pots. If you can't bring them inside, just turn them over. Very simple. It'll save them and you'll be able to use them for years to come. Another tip is whenever you know that there's a freeze coming in a few days, it sounds counterintuitive, but one of the master gardeners told me, water your plants well. Having well hydrated plants before a cold freeze will help them weather that freeze better. They'll be healthier and they'll be able to come back from any damage that the freeze might cause them. Don't water right before the freeze, like within a day or so you have standing water there or in the soil, but water a couple of days before a freeze. That'll help them. Winter is also a great time to plant and transplant trees, shrubs, anything bare root that you have. You can move those. This is the time when they're dormant, so it's much better to transplant these trees and shrubs now whenever they're not actually working on storing nutrients and growing and possibly putting out fruit. Another thing to do when your trees and shrubs are dormant in the winter, prune. Get out there, cut back any extra branches, any branches that are rubbing together. Prune your trees and your shrubs. Go ahead and do some research so you can see which ones need to be pruned in the winter. Not all of them do, but prune your trees and shrubs over the winter when they're dormant. Again, they will go ahead and they will come out better in the spring when they start to grow. They won't have to expend some extra strength putting effort into limbs and branches that you're just going to be cutting away anyway. This is a great time to clear out invasive species. I don't know about you, but I have wild blackberry in my yard and it seems like I just can't get rid of it. In the spring and summer, when all of the plants and everything is in leaf, it's really hard to see all of those vines very clearly. In the wintertime, when the leaves have dropped, I can see those vines with those spines on them very clearly, and I can get out there and I can get so many of those pulled out, cut back. Ivy is another thing. If you've got too much ivy, if it's taking over, now is a great time to get out there, grab the ivy, privet, prune back that privet. When you can see these things in the winter, it's so much easier to get in there and cut out what you don't want whenever it's not all covered up or hidden by leaves from the plants that you do want. The last thing you can do, read your gardening books. In the spring, summer, fall, when you're out there and you're busy, you may not have a lot of time to sit back and read some gardening books, research some tips on how to do this better or that better. Wintertime, rainy day, cold, everything's buried in snow. Grab some gardening books, kick back, and go ahead and brush up on your reading. As always, here at Forsyth County Public Library, we know books.